Hey guys, so in today's video, I'm going to tackle a data structures challenge. This is an algorithm. So the question is, you're given a string and you're supposed to return an array with two items. The character with the most repeated, the character repeated the most, and the second argument, the second array value will be the frequency of it. So this challenge is normally called the most repeated character or the most repeated string in a string. And also there's a note here that the characters are case sensitive. And this is how an example. So when you call this function and give it hello world, you have to count these letters or characters and find the most repeated character and return such an array whereby the first argument is the letter that is the most repeated and the second argument is how many times is it repeated. So I hope you understand the challenge. Let me repeat the challenge. The challenge is to find the character that is the most repeated. So for instance, if I add, so also you have another scenario whereby right now you can see that L is repeated 3 times and O is repeated 3 times as well. So in our challenge, you can return either. If there are two that are conflicting and they have the same sequence or the same number of repetitions, then you can return either. So here you could return 0 or L. But what if 0 is more, the O is more, is repeated the most, then here we should get O that is repeated 4 times. So I think you have understood the challenge that is here. And then as you can see, we are passing in hello world string. And remember that this is case sensitive. So let's start tackling this and see how can we come up with a solution to this. So on top here, you can see I have my console window. So this is where when we console log anything, then you're going to see the consoles there. So if you can try this solution on your own, don't use AI, just try to think through it. That would be very helpful. And if you don't understand, then come back and see how you're going to tackle this. So we want to get a scenario whereby we need to get a count of each item. So for instance, this is the sample data we are looking forward to. We are looking to see something like this. This is what I'm thinking. So H repeated once. Okay, so H once. And then E repeated once. L repeated how many times? Like that. So L is repeated. You just count L 1, 2, 3. L is repeated thrice. And then O is repeated twice. And then W is repeated once. And then R is repeated once. And then D is repeated once. And then the exclamation mark is repeated once. Then something I forgot, this is a space. A space is still a character, so it's after the O, and then the space is repeated once as well. So this is what we are trying to build up, such that we are trying to build up an object that will give us the number of occurrences the string is occurring. So what do you think we are supposed to do? So what I think we are supposed to do is that we need to come up with a way. We need to loop through this string. And after looping through this string, we need to find a way that we can get to such a result fast before even we think about returning the most repeated character. So this is what I'm thinking of. So we are going to start with an empty object. So we are going to start with an empty object, and then we are going to loop through the string that is provided. So the reason I initialized this string to an empty string so that I could get auto completion. So if I do str dot, you can see I can get all the string methods compared to when we don't know the signature of this. So if we try doing this str dot, it doesn't know, the JavaScript compiler doesn't know what I'm dealing with. So that's the reason I initialized it to an empty string so that I can get highlighting. So what I'm thinking, we can loop through these strings. I talked about how you can the for loop works. So you just initialize a variable, let I is equals to 0. So let me write 0, and whenever I is less than string dot length, so you can still get the length of a string using the string dot length. And then the incrementer, we are going to use I plus plus. And in that, we are able to loop through the indices of the string. So for instance, this is the string. We get the length, we get now the range of the indices, and then we are looping through each index, and then through that index, we can get the actual item. So what I'm going to do, the first thing I'm going to do here is that I'm going to get the current item we are working with. So I'm just going to say current item is equals to, let me use a short form. I will say current item. So I'll just use CI is equals to, we go to the string, we are looping through the indices because we are getting, if we get the length, then I is 0, then we are looping through the index 0, index 1, index 2, index 3, like that. So to get the actual item, we need to use array indexing, and then we grab that specific item. So for instance, during the first iteration, we are going to get H, capital H, right? The next thing I'm going to do, I'm going to use an if statement and say, if this item exists in my frequency. So we say that this one, we are calling it the character frequency. So if we are trying to see, do we have this item existing? So for instance, during the first iteration, we say, if we try to get this character from the frequency, like that. So what does this do? What does this do? So this tries to access this element from the object. So just to show you how that one works is that let's forget about, let's do this. Let's forget about this, and then we can comment that out. So let's take a step back and see how JavaScript objects work. So for instance, if I create a person object, so you can say let person is equals to, and then the name is equals to TechWithTwin, and then the age, let's say the age is 30 years. We have created a person object. So through this person object, we can access the properties and values inside. We can access the properties. These are the property and value. We can access these properties using two ways. One is the dot notation. So you can say person dot name, and then we can get the person's name's value. Then we can do person dot age. We can get the age. We could also use another syntax whereby we use the brackets, then age. We can use this syntax, and then, so let's console the person as well. First, we get this is the person. So if we access a person's property that exists, we get the value. What if we access something that doesn't exist? So we don't have a school, we get undefined. So that means this gives us a boolean. So in our character frequency, let me get rid of this. So in our character frequency, so let me comment out all this. In our character frequency, if you try to access a character that doesn't exist, this one will give us undefined, and this is what we want, because if it doesn't exist, then we can initialize that item by saying character frequency of this item we are working with, we initialize it to, what do we initialize it to? So character frequency of this current item, no, we first see that. So this one checks whether this item exists. If it exists, what do we do? That means we have that item in the object, because if this one evaluates to true, I think we could start with not. So if it doesn't exist, let's start with that. By using not, we are saying that if not character frequency of this item exists, because if character frequency of this current item doesn't exist, this one becomes false, and then not false is true. So if it doesn't exist, we initialize its value by 1, right? Otherwise, we use an else. This one now means that this item already exists in our character frequency, so we only need to update its value. So how do we do that? We just say that character frequency of this new item, and then now we assign it whatever was there previously. So whatever the value is currently, and then we increment by 1. I hope you understand that, because this is an already existing item and then we have found it again. So this is a character, maybe we found L. During the next iteration, we now need to just update its frequency. So we just update its frequency by saying that we get it and then assign it as its value as the new item. Does that make sense? So by doing that, now we can console log character frequency. Now we can return the character frequency. So let's return here. So after the for loop, let's return char frequency. And then if you do that, you can get now, you can see we got our frequency. So whereby we got an empty string shows up once, this one shows up once, H shows up once, D, L shows up thrice. So we can go ahead and try to count L. 1, 2, 3. L shows up thrice, O shows up twice, and then R. So the final thing we need to do now here is we already gotten the frequency. We are not going to return the frequency. We are going now to try and find the value that we want to, the value that is the most repeated. So how do we do that? I know this is not the best optimum solution, but let's focus on making sure that we first get a working solution, and then from there I'll leave you with the task of trying to make sure this is fast and executes fast through a concept called big O notation. You can read more about big O notation. This is more about creating faster running algorithms that doesn't use too much space. So we have those frequencies like this. This is the frequencies we are getting. Each character is a key property, and then the value is its frequency. So now let me introduce you to a new concept. We said, I don't know whether person still exists. We don't have person. I think it got scraped off. So we can create a new person. So we create the person again, and then if you do person, you can get that person. Now we want to do something else here. What if we wanted to get this as an array? So we have a way to do that. We use the object dot. Let me first show you. What if we wanted to get all these properties, just the properties that exist in this person? We can say object dot values. Let's start object dot values, and then the object, we pass the object. So we can get the values. So we can see we get the values as an array. So TechWithTwin and then 30. But if you wanted to get the value and the object itself, so person. So what if you wanted to see this one as an array, this one as an array? You just use object dot entries and then person. And then now you get two arrays inside an array with these keys, being that the first index is the property name, and the second the index 0, it's the property name, age, name, and then the first index is just the value. So we can use that. So let me show you how we can use that. Now we can create an array from the character frequency by saying, let's first create an empty array, because as we said, we want to return two things, one with items. I also don't need to write an empty array. I can just initialize a new variable, and then I'm going to say object.entries, and then which object? The character frequency. This one will give us such. It will give us an array with arrays inside, being that now instead of an object, this one will be the index 0, index 1, and then this one is an array, the next one like that. So let's return these and see what we get first. So return object.entries, and then we get these entries. You can see these are arrays. And inside the arrays now, we get new arrays, and each array has two datas. The first one is the property name and the value. Property name, value, property name, value. But now they are arrays that we can loop over. So instead of returning this, we can loop over these arrays and say dot for each. We can use the for each loop and get for each item. What do you want to do on each item? This is the syntax. What we want to do is that we want to check if we have anything in the if this object is still undefined. So if not object, so if there is nothing in this variable, what do? We initialize it to the first item. So we can say mr is equals to item, and then we return. Prevent this function. This is a function to just get out of that function so that it doesn't continue executing other lines of code. And then we can do, so what if it has something? What if this one is true? So the next thing we need to check is that is its value greater than the current item's value? If yes, then we swap the value. So let me show you. If item of index 1 will give us this value. This is item of index 1. This one is item of index 0. So we are trying to see the variable we created. We first did a check and saw that it has something. So that means during the first iteration, it will be assigned h of 1. During the second one, we are trying to see, is the value greater than the previous value's value? Let's do that. So if item of index 1 is greater than our variable of index 1, then we just switch that one to the new item. All right. So this is what we come up with. So finally, we are trying to see, now let's assume it gets to this position of L. It will check this value, will do this. The check will be like, is this value 3 greater than the previous item that was saved to the variable's value? So this one, L3 is greater than 1. So we assign now our variable to the new item, because the new item now is the king, it's the biggest. And then finally what we do, we can return mar, and then now we get the answer. You can see we get L is 0. L is repeated 3 times. So what if we increase the number of zeros here? Can increase O's. Now we get O5. Let's increase the number of H to 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. H is repeated 7 times. And that's the solution, guys. That's how you create this. You work out this issue. And then thank you for watching. Let me know in the comments, did you understand or were you left floating? Thank you.